Chapter 1. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 1. Abandoned by the World Author. Bitter days. Machine translation. That night, the heavy rain suddenly poured down. Apart from a few hurried pedestrians on the road, only the sound of the rain could be heard. There was a figure who looked so weak and petite, but she ran wildly in the rain as if her life depended on it. It seemed that there was no end to the road. The running finally stopped because she bumped into someone. That person was very tall. He was wearing a light blue shirt and a black suit. He held an ink-colored umbrella in his hand. Because of the girl's collision, his shirt was wet, showing his powerful but well-proportioned figure. "You little girl, what happened? Did someone die at home?" The driver walked out of the convenience store and happened to see this scene. No one died at home, but she was more miserable than a dead person. Liang Yunqing pursed her lips and said in an almost inaudible voice, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." "You didn't mean it? If you did, it would be worse. Do you know who you hit? Do you know that you might not be able to pay for this shirt even if you worked for 10 years? The driver seemed to be still angry as he stepped forward and poked her shoulder. Perhaps it was because of the weakness in her heart that made her even more vulnerable. Liang Yunqing was pushed lightly and fell to the ground. At that moment, all the grievances and uneasiness surged into her heart. Her shoulders trembled slightly and her eyes turned red. Fortunately, there was the cover of the rainstorm, so it would not make her crying look so shameful. Just 2 hours ago, Liang Yunqing found out that her surname was actually Liang. Her parents were not her biological parents. 16 years ago, she was carried by another girl in the hospital by the wrong person. The embarrassing thing was that her biological parents' careers were developing rapidly, and they had become famous families. Her adoptive parents were just ordinary workers, and her adoptive father had even become a disabled person due to work-related injuries. Liang Yunqing had never expected that her adoptive parents would actually bring her to the Liang family to ask for her child back. Yes, everyone knew that Su Yi, who was carried by her by a mistake, was beautiful and generous. She had studied art since she was young, and she had attended an American university at the age of 16. The Liang family had raised her into an arrogant peacock, and she was liked by everyone. And she was just an ugly little sparrow. She had seen the eyes of her adoptive parents and her biological parents very clearly. No one wanted her. Everyone only wanted Su Yi to be their daughter. Then, her mind was in a mess. She only wanted to be alone quietly. In a fit of anger, she ran out. Suddenly, a slender and clean hand reached out in front of her. Liang Yunqing was slightly stunned. After hesitating for a moment, she still reached out her hand and used the force to stand up. Her entire body was shrouded under the dark umbrella. The big hand was very warm and reassuring. However, she did not dare to look up at the man's face. His entire body was emitting a huge oppressive feeling. It was the aura of a king that intimidated all living beings. Liang Yunqing took a peek and found that the man had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was very handsome. However, his face was cold and expressionless, so she did not dare to continue staring at him. The man handed the hot cocoa in the driver's hand to her and said in a deep and magnetic voice, "Get in the car and I'll send you home." A simple and quick sentence was an order that could not be questioned. What could the 16-year-old Liang Yunqing do? Nothing. She could only return to that sad and desperate place after being drenched in the rain. Her adoptive parents had long abandoned her and Liang Yunqing was staying at the Liang family home. After tossing and turning all night, her parents seemed to have made a decision about whether she should stay or go. Liang Yunqing was sitting in this unfamiliar home. An unfamiliar sofa beside her were unfamiliar parents. "Yunqing, your mother and I have actually thought about your matter a long time ago." Mother Liang looked troubled, and Father Liang could only force himself to speak. "Half a year ago, we realized that we had hugged the wrong you and E. Afraid that you would be sad, we agreed to hide it. They wanted money, so they suddenly sent you here. It's really not something. You probably don't know that our Liang family, the Yin family, once had a favor to show to a big aristocratic family that was currently in the limelight. You, just tell us the result. Liang Yunqing felt a headache, and she did not want to listen to Liang Yaosheng's long speech. The Liang and Yin families had a marriage contract. A few days ago, the Yin family sent someone to discuss this matter. But you know, Yi studied abroad since she was young. Her ideas are very modern. We always thought that it was difficult for her to accept such a thing, and we did not know how to bring it up. Now that you're back, I think that this must be God's arrangement. You can enjoy your life as the young madam. This way, you can directly consider yourself married and not have a new family. Wouldn't everyone be happy? Liang Yunqing widened her eyes in disbelief and looked at the words of the man who was supposed to be connected to her by blood. Chapter 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The Man That Everyone Feared. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. What a happy ending. Yes, the happy ending was that they could get rid of this shameful burden. They didn't have to worry anymore. The little sparrow would affect their reputation. They just had to get rid of it as soon as possible. Liang Yunqing bit her lower lip out of habit. She suddenly remembered that this was her first time back here, and her so-called biological parents didn't even ask her how she was doing in the Su family. Fortunately, they didn't completely abandon her. Although she couldn't accept such a thing, at least they wanted her to have a good home. I just celebrated my 16th birthday and have not reached the legal age for marriage. It's too early to say this, Liang Yunqing said carefully. A family like ours is naturally different from ordinary people. But it's not like the ancient marriages where you get married without seeing each other. So you have to live in the Yin family now and cultivate a relationship with Yin-san. If things go smoothly, you will get engaged at 18 and get married at 20. Liang Yunqing could not accept that her future life would be decided so hastily overnight. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in such things. I'm already independent and can completely live by myself. What she meant was that she wanted to leave this place and not be manipulated by them. Liang Yunqing did not say anything more. She turned around and went upstairs, returning to the guest room where she stayed. As if there was a flood beast chasing after her, Liang Yunqing fled in a hurry, so she did not hear the last words that Liang Yaosheng said to her. Young Master Yin is free tomorrow and said that he will come. Meet him first, maybe you will change your mind. Liang Yunqing stayed in the room alone and had no appetite for a long time. She did not eat lunch or dinner. At night, she was cold and hot at the same time. Her throat was sore as if she had caught a cold. Liang Yunqing wanted to go downstairs to find a cup of hot water to drink, but she was surprised to hear the cook, who was on the night shift, cleaning the kitchen, chatting with a man in a low voice. I really don't know what Master is thinking. He wants to marry Miss Yunqing just like that. If Miss Yunqing doesn't marry him, does he want Miss Yi to marry him? You are a woman with long hair and short knowledge. You don't know. I heard that Yin Qianqian is an orphan of Tiansha. He is famous for being evil. He is cruel and vicious. His shrewdness is unfathomable, drifting between black and white. Even old Master Yin himself is afraid of him. He often secretly regrets giving birth to him. Then Miss Yunqing will marry him. So, I guess that when the Yin family came to talk about this matter, old Master began to worry. He would definitely not bear to let Miss Yi marry that kind of person, but he did not dare to dishonor third young Master Yin. This just happened to be the one who was sent to him. Liang Yunqing felt dizzy. Her heart kept falling into the empty abyss. Her hands and feet were cold. So it turned out that she was just a person who suffered for Su Yi. In vain, she had found an excuse for her parents. She thought that they really hoped that she could live a safe and secure life, so they made such a choice. Everything was just her wishful thinking. And that Yin family, she didn't want to go, she could live well on her own. Liang Yunqing thought so as she sleepwalked through the corridor and fell back onto her bed. Her mind was in a mess and she fell into a dream very quickly. That night, Liang Yunqing slept very restlessly. She kept dreaming of strange things, the Su family, the Liang family, and that scary man in the rumors. In the end, she was in a sea of fire. Fortunately, she hugged a piece of cold ice, but for some reason, the ice suddenly grew a mouth and bit her face. Pain, heat. Liang Yunqing woke up with a flutter. There was no sea of fire in the dream, but she still felt uncomfortable as if she was burned by the fire. Her eyes focused in a daze. A man's face that was very close to her appeared in front of her eyes. She was shocked and quickly moved back. She hugged the quilt and looked at the man vigilantly. Who are you? This was clearly her room. How could a stranger suddenly barge in? Chapter 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Then I Must Marry You. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Who are you? Liang Yunqing was like a frightened little hedgehog. She stood up with all the thorns on her body, not letting anyone take a step closer. The man took back his posture of leaning forward and stood up again. He stood tall and straight with a stern look on his face. He stood there like a god. He was sacred and not to be offended. He did not even raise his eyebrows when he saw that Liang Yunqing was overreacting. You have a fever. Liang Yunqing recognized the voice and the person with just 2 words. It was him, the man she bumped into in the rain last night. You. Yin Qianqian. Yin Qianqian directly called out his name and his gaze fell on Liang Yunqing's face. That was why he hated this kind of soft, fragile and pretentious little thing the most. If she had a fever, it would be her own fault. Why did she learn to act in the rain like in an idle drama? Look, she fell sick so easily. Although Liang Yunqing's pair of shiny black eyes were very beautiful, and when she looked straight at people, she would be like a little deer that yearned for someone to caress her, but Yin Qianqian's first impression of her was really not good. Yin Qianqian, so. He was the rumored most terrifying evil young master of the Yin family. Liang Yunqing still found it hard to believe that such a coincidence could actually happen in this world. The night before, the moon was high and the wind was dark, so she did not see his features clearly. Now that Liang Yunqing had seen this man clearly, his handsome face did not quite match his strong aura. Perhaps because of this, his dressing was more mature. His meticulous suit revealed his perfect figure, and his jet-black hair was all back, combed into an arrogant wolf's head. Liang Yunqing was stunned for a moment before she realized that she had been looking at a man for such a long time, no matter how good looking he was still a scary person. She quickly retracted her strange thoughts. Thank you for yesterday's incident and for your hot cocoa, but, cough cough. Liang Yunqing stopped coughing and continued in a nasal voice, but it's really impolite of you to enter my room without permission, Mr. Yin. The door wasn't locked. I told you to get up, but you hugged my hand. Yin Qianqian only knew how to state the truth directly and did not say any nonsense. It turned out that the ice cube that made her feel very comfortable was him. Liang Yunqing coughed a few more times. Seeing that Yin Qianqian had no intention of leaving, she finally could not help but chase him away. The door was not locked, but that doesn't mean that you can enter as you please. I'm already awake. Mr. Yin, you don't have to stand here anymore, right? As long as you can stand up on your own, I'll leave. What did he mean? Liang Yunqing lifted the blanket and supported her body with her arms. Just as she was about to stretch out her legs to get off the bed, her body suddenly felt weak and her legs went weak. She almost knelt on the ground. What she almost meant was that she did not kneel on the ground because Yin Qianqian, who was standing beside her bed, was quick with his long arms. He turned around and carried her horizontally. I heard that you don't want to marry me. Yin Qianqian's ice-cold face showed a hint of relaxation. Hey, was it not good to talk about such a topic in such a position? Seeing that she did not speak, Yin Qianqian put her back on the bed, but he did not stop. Instead, he wrapped her tightly in the blanket like a silkworm baby, only exposing her head to breathe. Then, he carried her and the blanket easily again. Oh, what are you doing? Liang Yunxing exploded again, but because she was muffled under the blanket, her fighting strength was greatly weakened. I've thought about it. Although the road is bumpy, I'll still take you back to recuperate. When Liang Yunxing heard his words, she was stunned for a moment before she understood the meaning behind it. I don't want to go back with you. Upon hearing his words, Liang Yunxing suddenly struggled. She could not compromise. If she was taken away by him, wouldn't that mean that she had tacitly agreed to marry him? You must not know that I am naturally rebellious. For example, if I want someone to sit down, but that person insists on standing up, then I will break his legs and let him sit down. Feeling her struggle, the person who still had a trace of expression finally regained his icy expression. Liang Yunxing blinked. Hearing Yin Qianqian's description, she shuddered. At the same time, she also knew that this man must not have given the scariest example. This was a kind of absolute tyranny that did not allow others to have the slightest resistance. Even though he was shameless, there was nothing he could do about it. It seems that you are really not satisfied with me, then I must marry you. Chapter 4. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 4. I will make you a high-quality woman author. Bitter days. Machine translation. You must marry her. Liang Yunxing felt that when she heard this, she was about to roll her eyes and suffocate. She wanted to ask clearly, Mr. Yin, what kind of grudge do I have with you? To Yin Qianqian, this kind of thing was like playing with a little kitten and a little white rabbit. It was so casual that if he wanted to, he could squeeze you to death with just a little strength of his fingers. But to Liang Yunxing, this could be a matter that concerned her for the rest of her life. I don't accept it. You can't force me. Liang Yunxing was already hot-tempered. When she got angry, she struggled vigorously and shouted in her hoarse voice. Her small face was as sullen as a ripe apple. Be obedient. Yin Qianqian lowered his voice and slapped the area below her waist across the blanket with a warning tone. Pervert. Pervert. Liang Yunxing reprimanded him weakly. Without any deterrent force, she turned her body to show that she hated Yin Qianqian's actions. At this moment, Yin Qianqian had already ignored her objection and carried a bundle of quilts downstairs. Obviously, the group of people who were sitting upright downstairs and waiting for Yin Qianqian to wake up Liang Yunxing also saw this strange scene. Hey, what happened? Liang Yaoxing was obviously shocked and terrified. He rushed up and asked about the situation. Yunxing got caught in the rain the night before last and has a fever, Yin Qianqian answered concisely. Liang Yunxing frowned, unaccustomed to it. This was the first time he called her name. Xingxing has a fever. Liang Yaoxing scolded, why didn't you tell mom and dad? How can you meet people when you're sick? Quick, young Master Yin, put her down. After she recovers, I'll bring her to see you personally. Yes, if she didn't tell them, they wouldn't have found out that she was sick at all. These were her parents. Liang Yunxing's heart trembled slightly. She lowered her eyes and didn't continue to struggle. They didn't even care about her as much as an outsider like Yin Qianqian. He even knew that it was because of the rain that night, but they did not think of anything. There's no need. I'll bring Yunxing back to see the doctor now. The Liang family's expressions became strange. Why did Yin Qianqian's tone sound like he already treated Liang Yunxing as his property? Of course, no one dared to ask or even question her. Take me with you. If you walk out of here, it might be good to go anywhere. She was so sick that she was dizzy. Liang Yunxing did not have much ability to think. She could only be held in someone's arms like a puppet. Yunxing. This cry was from Liang Yunqing's mother, Chen Xinyuo. She had not even spoken to her daughter properly in the past few days. She could not face her daughter, nor could she promise anything. Even though Liang Yunqing was her biological child, she had already invested all her efforts in her adopted daughter. If she could only choose one of the two to acknowledge a child, then she could only let Liang Yunqing suffer. She could not use a perfect daughter to exchange for a daughter who had not even received higher education and had never come into contact with the upper class. Therefore, at this moment, she could only watch as her own daughter was pushed into the arms of a demon. Liang Yunqing did not respond to her. Yin Qianqian did not waste any more time. Seeing that Liang Yunqing did not say anything, he turned around and walked out of the door of the Liang family. He carried Liang Yunqing and sat in the car. "Why didn't you ask me? Why didn't you ask her why she ran in the rain that day? Why didn't you ask her why this daughter of the Liang family looked so down and out?" "I don't need to ask anyone what I want to know," Yin Qianqian answered calmly. It seemed that he had known his place in the Liang family for a long time. At this moment, Yin Qianqian suddenly said, "You are 16 years old this year. When you are 20 years old and get married, there are still 4 years left. I will let you become a high-quality woman." Although her head hurt, this strange sentence still made Liang Yunqing blink her big eyes. She stared at Yin Qianqian as if she had seen a monster. High-quality woman. He said this sentence. What did he mean? Chapter 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. I haven't kissed anyone yet. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. You're 16 this year. When you're 20 and get married, there are still 4 years left. I'll make you a high-quality woman. Liang Yunqing silently repeated this sentence again, but she still couldn't understand the meaning behind it. Of course, your own hard work is also very important. Yin Qianqian didn't even turn around to look at her. He just kept talking to himself. If I work hard, what will the result be? Liang Yunqing cleared her throat and asked in a low voice. If you work hard, you are qualified to be my wife and marry me. Please, you seem to have misunderstood your own position. Liang Yunqing was powerless to complain. If that was the case, she would definitely try her best to mess up everything and strive for the worst result so that she would not marry him. Don't you want to do your best and show these people who look down on you today that what you gave up is a shining diamond? Raise your head and look down on everyone. Yin Qianqian spoke in a deep voice with an imposing manner. It gave people the illusion that he was talking about himself. It was unknown whether it was the content of his words or the strong resonance in his chest that made Liang Yunqing jolt. Let everyone see that she was not the incompetent Liang Yunqing. Let them regret abandoning them. Let them become the most outstanding woman. Raise their heads and look down on everyone. It had to be said that Yin Qianqian's words really moved Liang Yunqing. The car stopped at the destination and the door was opened from the outside. A middle-aged man in a simple suit with a smile on his face bent down and made a gesture of extending his hand to lead the way. Sir is back. Dr. Ling is already waiting. The most important thing now is to cure your feverish brain. Without waiting for Liang Yunqing to answer his previous words, Yin Qianqian took the lead to step out of the car. He turned around again, lowered his head, bent down, and picked up Liang Yunqing. The butler, Hao Cheng, took a step forward. He intended to help Yin Qianqian take over Liang Yunqing, but he stepped aside to let him pass. Hao Cheng immediately understood and made way for him. There were already a few helpers waiting by the side. Although they did not dare to whisper about their master, every one of them had a look of surprise in their eyes. Because this was the first time they saw their master bring a girl home and even take care of her personally. The princess carrying her in front of so many people made Liang Yunqing feel embarrassed. She tried even harder to bury her face in the blanket. I heard that the one who brought back is young Madame Yin. Ling Ruofei, who was dressed in a doctor's white robe, walked over quickly. He pulled the blanket away and revealed Liang Yunsheng's red face, making an exaggerated expression. Yin Qianqian, you really don't pity her at all. This girl is still so young, you are merciless. In this world, there were countless people who dared to joke with Yin Qianqian. Ling Ruofei was one of them. Probably because he had long understood Ling Ruofei's personality, Yin Qianqian did not make a fuss about his teasing. Liang Yunsheng also glanced at Ling Ruofei from the corner of her eyes, thinking that this doctor looked very refined and good-looking, but there was something wrong with his brain. Fortunately, although Ling Ruofei was always smiling, his medical skills were still very reliable. A small cold was nothing to him. Liang Yunsheng quickly fell asleep after getting in 4 drip. This time, perhaps because of the effects of the medicine, she slept very peacefully and had no dreams for the whole night. She could not breathe anymore. No matter how good her sleep was, it could not be compared to the feeling of dying. Liang Yunsheng opened her mouth and breathed in the fresh air in large mouthfuls. She jumped up from the bed and directly knocked her mouth on an object 3 centimeters in front of her. Then, she opened her eyes and saw Mr. Yin standing there with an unpleasant expression, covering his face. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Liang Yunsheng finally reacted to what she had just touched with her mouth. Oh my God! She covered her mouth. I have never kissed anyone other than my family. And, it's a man. Even Yin Qianqian could not help but twitch his eyelids. He ran his fingers across his cheekbones, which had a small imprint on them. It was hard to tell whether he was angry or not. Liang Yunsheng looked at him carefully. Suddenly, Mr. Yin's skills exploded. He pressed Liang Yunsheng's body back onto the bed with one hand and held her wrists with the other, preventing her from moving. Hey! What are you doing? Seeing Yin Qianqian's face getting closer and closer, Liang Yunsheng screamed and closed her eyes tightly. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. It's better to be completely destroyed. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. This was definitely a standard posture with bad intentions. Although Liang Yunsheng was young, she had never eaten pork before and had seen pigs run before. Yin Qianqian was very strong. He did not even use much strength and made her unable to move. No way. It was just that he accidentally broke Yin Qianqian's face. It would not lead to any fatal disaster, right? Liang Yunsheng noticed that Yin Qianqian's face was approaching her. Because of Yin Qianqian's approach, her heart was beating even more intensely in her chest. Yin Qianqian's warm breath landed on Liang Yunsheng's face. She closed her eyes and her eyelashes trembled slightly. Her face, which still had a little bit of baby fat, was bitten hard. It hurts. Liang Yunsheng opened her eyes and realized that Yin Qianqian had also bitten her face. Why did you bite me? Liang Yunsheng rubbed her face in pain. Yin Qianqian let go of her gently and did not speak. Liang Yunsheng glanced at the small skinned wound on his face and was still a little embarrassed. So childish. A tit for a tat, this is called revenge for the smallest grievance. Don't imitate the Yazi, okay? Because Yazi is very ugly. Liang Yunsheng muttered in a low voice. Try this on. Yin Qianqian put on a, I don't know whose childish face and threw the clothes in his hands into Liang Yunsheng's arms. Liang Yunsheng picked up the clothes and took a look. She found that it was a light pink evening gown with a gray bird pinned at the corner of the skirt. Oh right. Why did you come in without knocking again? This time, I'm not terminally ill and can't walk. Thinking of Yin Qianqian's method of waking her up, Liang Yunsheng could not help but grind her teeth in anger. The owner of this room is me. What kind of answer was that? If that was the case, how could the world be reasonable? Liang Yunsheng probably forgot that the person in front of her was the infamous evil young master. Who would dare to reason with him? He would only tell you that he was the one who was reasonable. What's with this dress? There's an unimportant birthday party in a week's time. Prepare yourself. I'm going too. If you want to be a woman worthy of me, you have to start learning from now on. Getting better is not a reason for you to slack off. I'm not worthy of you, alright. Liang Yunxing screamed in her heart, but of course she knew that she could not resist the man in front of her again and again. I still have some things to do. Yin Qianchen looked down at his watch and then looked up. My personal assistant, An Ziming, will be here in an hour to teach you what to do. Do I really have to listen to him? Liang Yunxing was a little lost. She hugged her clothes and sat by the bed without saying a word. Are you still hesitating? When Yin Qianchen finally closed the door, he turned around and said, Go back now. Continue being an ordinary person. Disappear here and be content with being ordinary. Let those people rejoice. Fortunately, they didn't choose Liang Yunxing in the first place. The eyes of her parents and the words they said to her were like nails that pierced her heart. Because of Yin Qianchen's words, they were taken out and stabbed her again. What should she do? Liang Yunxing's fingers clenched tightly onto the clothes in her arms. She loosened her lower lip and said, I don't want. Yes, she could no longer go back, she could no longer return to the calm and peaceful Liang Yunxing who lived a normal life. Since that was the case, she might as well change completely. The happiness and stability of the past were no longer there. Why not just destroy her silly self and become better? Moreover, Liang Yunxing knew that even if she chose to leave this place, Yin Qianchen might not let her off so easily. It was better to take things as they came. Even if she wanted to escape, she should find a better opportunity. Your decision is very right, Yin Qianchen replied indifferently. Liang Yunxing did not raise her head in time, so she did not realize that the moment the man finished his last sentence and closed the door, the corner of his usually cold mouth curled up slightly. Chapter 7 You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 7. Could it be that he was really an old lover? Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. It was easy to change one's past and become a capable person. It sounded like a hot-blooded suggestion, but it was not the same if one wanted to put it into practice. Liang Yunxing originally thought that An Ziming would be as gentle as Ling Ruofei and Hao Cheng, since they were both working for Yin Qianchen. Who knew that it was completely out of her expectations? Your aptitude is too poor. It's not impossible for a sparrow to fly to the top, but that requires 1,000 years of cultivation. Can you do it? Your education level is high school dropout. Isn't that equivalent to being illiterate? A person without any taste wouldn't be able to tell anything. This dress was actually custom-made for you by President Yin yesterday afternoon. When Sophia came back from Paris, she personally designed it and produced the finished product in one night. Oh, right, do you know how much a piece of clothing made by Sophia is worth? Not to mention, it's an extra. I'm anxious. If I tell you, you'll be scared to death. So, I decided not to tell you. Also, I realized that in the current situation, it's obvious that the world's top fashion designer, Sophia, can't save you anymore. Because this dress, when worn by you, still looks like a street-level item that costs 50 yuan for 3 pieces. What's in it for you to insult me like this? Liang Yunxing clenched her hands that were hanging by her legs and looked straight at An Ziming with her big round eyes. I'm not as high-end and elegant as you. But don't forget, you're just an errand boy for Yin Qianchen. She was not usually this aggressive, but she was definitely not a steamed bun that could be bullied. An Ziming was stunned for a moment and suddenly smiled. You have a very unique personality, little girl. Since you are so amazing, I believe that in a week, Miss Liang, you will definitely be able to familiarize yourself with the contents of these books and become an outstanding young lady from an influential family. An Ziming took out a stack of books and placed them in front of Liang Yunxing. He turned around and left with a triumphant smile on his face. What kind of joke was this? He was a CEO's special assistant, yet he was reduced to serving such a poor little sister. The best way was to let her get mad and chase him away. Table manners, social etiquette, upper-class society. How to become a lady, what are these things? Liang Yunqing picked up a book and opened it in confusion. In the days that followed, Yin Qianqian was busy with something. He did not appear for a few days. Hao Qing would arrange Liang Yunqing's meals and living arrangements, so she could only hold those strange books and gnaw at them from morning till night. After all, she did not want to be looked down upon by Enziming, who used his chin to look at people. However, even after reading the whole book, she was still confused. After all, social interaction was not something that could be mastered easily. It was not until the unimportant birthday party that Yin Qianqian mentioned arrived that the person who appeared in front of Liang Yunqing was still Enziming. I also advise Miss Liang not to be too arrogant because of my favor. You probably don't know why you were brought into the venue by me. It was because President Yin instructed us not to reveal your identity for the time being. Enziming was obviously very happy to see that Yin Qianqian did not acknowledge Liang Yunqing. When did she become arrogant due to favoritism? Liang Yunqing would be best if Yin Qianqian erased her from his life as a person who wore the title of fiancé. And the most important thing now was that Enziming had left her in this huge villa without telling her what to do. He also did not tell her where Yin Qianqian was. Liang Yunqing carefully moved to a sofa in a corner and sat down. Beside her was a 14 or 15-year-old boy. He was dressed in a white suit and had handsome features. However, he kept his head down as he fiddled with a Rubik's Cube. Hello. Holding the thought that it was easier to strike up a conversation with a child than an adult, Liang Yunqing shuffled over. The boy still kept his head down and ignored her. Do you know where Yin Qianqian and Mr. Yin are? This time, Liang Yunqing did not have much hope, but she received a response from the boy. Yin Qianqian. Oh. You mean that iceberg facial paralysis? I know. The boy made an understanding expression, grabbed Liang Yunqing's wrist, and walked straight to the balcony on the second floor of the villa. Hey, isn't he there? There's an auntie with a D-cup beside him. He's probably in a relationship. Liang Yunqing looked in the direction that the young man was pointing at. It was indeed Yin Qianqian, and beside him stood a woman who was dressed luxuriously and dazzlingly. The romantic balcony of the villa, the bright moon, the breeze, the fine wine, and the beautiful woman. TSK, it was really difficult for people to not want to indulge in any nonsense. Liang Yunqing raised her eyebrows slightly. Could it be that he was really an old lover? Chapter 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. She's my female companion author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. No. What old lover? It's completely possible that she's my current lover. Liang Yunqing blinked and facepalmed as she suddenly thought of this explosive question. What's wrong? The young man turned his face and looked at Liang Yunqing beside him. His expression changed as if he had understood something. Don't tell me you like that person. The young man's expression changed from gossipy to sympathetic. From top to bottom, and then from bottom to top, he sized up Liang Yunqing. The young man's tone was also filled with great sympathy. Yin Qianqian is indeed difficult to reach. It's understandable for Cinderella to dream a little. Actually, you're not bad looking. Although you can't compare to those small celebrities and rich daughters I've met, but at least you're natural. It's okay if your breasts are a little smaller. You can still work hard. You're overthinking it. Who would torture themselves to like that terrifying person? Liang Yunqing glared at him and crossed her arms over her chest. To think that this shabby child was so well dressed and looked like a rich young master. Why did he speak so? Ah. You were the one who asked me about Yin Qianqian. You should know that offending him is no joke. I took such a big risk to bring you to see him. You owe me a favor. This kid must have read too many wuxia novels. However, Liang Yunsheng thought about it and realized that what he said was the truth. If it weren't for him bringing her along, she wouldn't have found Yin Qianqian so quickly. Okay. I owe you a favor, okay. Liang Yunsheng wasn't in the mood to talk nonsense with him. The key was how she was going to find Yin Qianqian now. Although she didn't want to have anything to do with Yin Qianqian, he was the only one who was familiar with her here. In order to protect herself and leave smoothly, it was better to get in touch with Yin Qianqian. Was she going to go there directly? Liang Yunsheng suddenly thought of what Enziming had told her. Yin Qianqian did not want to reveal his identity, so it was probably not good for her to go there rashly. Although Enziming did not like her, he would not go so far as to fake an imperial edict. How about this? Let's go closer and listen to what they are saying. The youth poked Liang Yunsheng with his elbow. The two of them sneakily went over while the people on the balcony were not paying attention. Things are still going according to the original plan. No mistakes are allowed. What if? Liang Yunsheng pricked up her ears, but she only heard half of Yin Qianqian's words. Come out. Yin Qianqian raised his voice this time. It was a little scary. Are you talking about us? Liang Yunsheng turned her face in surprise and asked the youth beside her in a low voice. The youth's expression was also a little solemn as he nodded. You Siue. Yin Qianqian called out another name. Here. The youth suddenly jumped up, touched his head, and said with a cheeky smile, Brother Chen. What a coincidence. You guys are here too. Admire the moon, admire the flowers, admire the stars. Yin Qianqian's expression did not change. He just raised his chin at the other person squatting beside his feet. Yu Siue kicked Liang Yunsheng. Liang Yunsheng also slowly stood up, raised her head, and looked at Yin Qianqian. Of course, her eyes were slightly evasive. After all, she had just appeared in the position of eavesdropping. Yu Siue did not know that his nerves had suddenly gone crazy. He reached out to hold Liang Yunsheng's arm. Liang Yunsheng clearly saw that Yin Qianqian's eyes narrowed slightly. This is. Yin Qianqian was the first to ask. This is my female companion. She's quite cute, isn't she? Yu Siue said as he leaned closer to Liang Yunsheng. Oh. Your female companion is very cute. Yin Qianqian's indifferent tone was tinged with playfulness. Liang Yunsheng did not know why, but she could hear a hint of danger in it. Chapter 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Take this as my first lesson for you, author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Yes, Yu Siue said, as if he wanted to prove her identity. He even reached out and hugged Liang Yunsheng's shoulders, bringing the two of them closer. Although the young man was still thin, he was already very tall. He had long arms and legs, and he looked like an adult who was not familiar with him. Yin Qianqian stood there, looking especially tall because of his tall stature. Tonight, he was wearing a green-gray suit. His left shoulder to his chest and abdomen were inlaid with bits of broken diamonds. The suit pants covered his ankles perfectly, but it did not appear too long. The black leather shoes on his feet were very simple, but they were spotless, showing his domineering style. Liang Yunsheng suddenly thought of what Enziming had said to her about clothes. Yin Qianqian's clothes today must have been designed by that Sophia. As expected. No matter what the clothes were, different people wearing different clothes would reveal different styles. Liang Yunsheng subconsciously tugged at the hem of her skirt, and the little gray bird attached to it also moved. But wasn't her dress specially designed? Why did Yin Qianqian have such a wicked interest in allowing such an ugly thing to stick to it? Yin Qianqian didn't say anything else. He just gave the woman beside him a look, and that person lowered his head and retreated submissively. He didn't even raise his head to look at Liang Yunsheng and Yu Siue. It didn't seem like the kind of relationship they imagined. It was more like a servant than a lover. Liang Yunsheng and Yu Siyue looked at each other. Obviously, the two of them had the same idea. Liang Yunsheng, it seems that, and Ziming has taught you a lot. Yin Qianchen walked slowly to Liang Yunsheng's side. Liang Yunsheng could not help but shrink back. She felt the cold aura emanating from Yin Qianchen. That's right, it seemed that now was not the time to care about others, but the time to try to protect yourself. Yin Qianchen hooked a lock of Liang Yunsheng's soft hair with his index finger and touched it. You've already found a male partner so quickly. Yu Siyue saw Yin Qianchen's ambiguous actions and knew that it was not good. Yin Qianchen even knew her name. Could it be? This little girl was not Yin Qianchen's secret lover. Instead, the two of them had this, and that relationship. Suddenly, the music in the villa changed. The huge center of the venue had been vacated as a dance floor. The waltz music was melodious, and couples danced hand in hand. The atmosphere was harmonious. Then, young Master Yu, would you suggest lending me your female partner for a dance? The corners of Yin Qianchen's lips curled up slightly. Yu Siyue trembled. Yin Qianchen actually smiled at him. Yin Qianchen actually smiled at him. Yin Qianchen actually smiled at him. Yu Siyue would believe it if he said that Mars would crash into Earth soon. Although Yu Siyue was young, he was born in a wealthy family. If he could not even tell that Yin Qianchen is in a bad mood, then he had better wash up and go to bed early. Take it. Brother Chen, and I don't need to be polite. Yu Siyue reached out and pushed Liang Yunsheng in front of Yin Qianchen. Hey, do you have to be so disloyal just now? They had gone through thick and thin together. Liang Yunsheng wanted to cry but had no tears. However, before she could think about it, her hand was held by Yin Qianchen, and her slender waist was also held by his strong arms, forcing her closer to him. Miss Liang, do you know how to dance? Take it as my first lesson to you. Yin Qianchen lowered his head, and his lips touched her little earlobe. The magnetic voice came closer, and it seemed to become more attractive. Liang Yunsheng could not help but blush. Chapter 10. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 10. I feel like you have a chance to chase him. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Fortunately, the night was dark and Liang Yunsheng's red apple-like face did not attract much attention from Yin Qianchen. Yin Qianchen pulled Liang Yunsheng and did not sneak into the crowded place in the house. He just jumped on the empty space on the balcony. Liang Yunsheng turned her head absent-mindedly and stole a glance at Yu Siyue. She found that the child had run away from the wall. Who do you miss? Yin Qianchen asked straightforwardly as if he had the ability to read minds. No, I don't miss anyone. I'm learning how to dance seriously. Liang Yunsheng pursed her lips and wanted to laugh. She didn't quite believe that Yin Qianchen, who always kept a straight face and loved to do as he pleased, would look so good at a dance. Waltz. She imagined Yin Qianchen dancing arrogantly, but in the end, he still failed. Yin Qianchen looked down at Liang Yunsheng's red face and smiled gently. Suddenly, he felt that this girl wasn't that bad. However, things about Yin Qianchen always overturned Liang Yunsheng's imagination. The ordinary waltz steps were not as funny as Liang Yunsheng remembered. Yin Qianchen led her forward and backward. Liang Yunsheng's body stiffened. She originally thought that her IQ was not bad, but after this round, she almost suspected that she had a problem with her limbs. Aya. Again, I stepped on your feet. Liang Yunsheng hurriedly squatted down to wipe away the eyesore shoe print, but Yin Qianchen pulled her arm. Continue. Continue. Initially, her body was warm from exercising, but after stepping on Yin Qianchen's feet consecutively, Liang Yunsheng's back was almost covered in cold sweat. You didn't learn this lesson well. After finishing the song, Yin Qianchen let go. There's no need to feel too much pressure. This time, I only asked you to come and play. There's a buffet on the first floor. If you're hungry, go ahead. And Ziming will come back to pick you up after the banquet. It would have been better if Yin Qianchen had not said anything, but when he said that, Liang Yunqing's stomach began to growl. Yin Qianchen turned around and returned to the villa. He did not look at her again, as if the beautiful scene just now was just a wonderful dream. Liang Yunqing looked at his back and was stunned for a moment. She quickly lowered her head and pushed the door open to return to the house. She pursed her lips and felt a little concerned. It seemed that Yin Qianchen really did not want others to know that there was a connection between the two of them. Surprisingly, when Liang Yunqing came to the dining table on the first floor, she met Yu Siyue, who was engrossed in eating a fruit salad. You actually came back alive. Yu Siyue was biting a banana in his mouth. He pulled Liang Yunqing back in surprise and gave her a thumbs up. This is the first time I've seen someone who can deal with that terrifying iceberg. I feel like you have a chance of chasing him. What? How many times have I told you, I'm not chasing him? Liang Yunqing emphasized again. Alright, I'll help you no matter what. Should we get to know each other again? USOAUE. Liang Yunqing. Liang Yunqing smiled and held Yu Siyue's hand. Does this count as the first friend I've ever had in my life? From the looks of it, her new life didn't seem so annoying. Are you hungry? Eat this small cake. It's soft and not greasy. I've already tried it. Therefore, in this villa, in this group of people who were fighting with wits and courage, there were two little hamsters with bulging cheeks sitting there eating delicious food and watching a good show. Liang Yunqing. A man's voice suddenly called her name from behind. Liang Yunqing stopped eating. That voice sounded familiar. Could it be that person? No, he would never appear here.